My name is Amanda, and I'm 36. Today, I stood in a church, its stained glass windows casting a warm glow over the pews, my heart swelling as my daughter Clara, the light of my life, prepared to marry. I raised her alone, every sacrifice stitched into the fabric of our bond after her dad walked out when she was barely 3. I wore a simple navy dress chosen with care, my fingers tracing the locket she gave me years ago, its tiny clasp a reminder of our shared strength. But as I smiled, I caught the groom's family whispering, their smirks sharp as needles. My nameplate propped on the guest table read, "Low educated fake mom." Shame stung hot, and sudden my cheeks burning as I stood frozen, the organ's soft hum fading. Why would they do this? Have you ever felt judged at a moment meant for joy? Share where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories. The ballroom glittered with white roses cascading over tall vases, their petals catching the flicker of crystal chandeliers, a world so far from the cramped diner where I'd worked double shifts to raise Clara. The air smelled of lavender and champagne, a dizzying contrast to the greasy coffee pots I knew. I smoothed my dress, its hem slightly frayed, still rattled by the nameplate's cruel words, but determined to focus on my daughter's joy. Clara glowed, her white gown shimmering as she twirled with Ethan, her laughter cutting through the string quartet's melody. I caught her eye across the polished floor, and she waved her smile, a lifeline, pulling me from the edge of doubt. For a moment, I believed I could belong here, that the whispers I'd overheard didn't matter, that I could stand tall in this sea of wealth. Then Margaret, Ethan's mother, glided over her silk dress, rustling her perfume sharp and floral, her smile sharper still. She leaned in her pearl earrings, glinting voice low but clear as glass. "Clara's so fortunate, isn't she, to rise above her roots like this?" Her eyes flicked over me, lingering on my calloused hands, the hands that had scrubbed dishes to pay for Clara's school supplies. The words landed like a slap, stripping away the warmth of Clara's wave, leaving a cold ache in my chest. I forced a nod, my throat tight, remembering the nights I stayed up teaching Clara math. I barely understood, my eyes straining over textbooks under a dim kitchen bulb scraping by to afford her dreams. I glanced at the table, hoping to hide my flush, but my sister Rachel was already there, her wineglass half empty, watching me with eyes too soft, too knowing. She tilted her head, her pity a weight I couldn't bear. "You okay, Amanda?" she asked, her voice gentle, like I was a cracked vase ready to shatter. I shrugged, muttering something about the heat, the room's warmth suddenly stifling, and excused myself to grab a drink. The bartender, a young woman with kind eyes and a quick smile, poured me a soda. The fizz, a small comfort as I sipped it slowly, trying to steady my pulse, the ice clinking against the glass like a faint heartbeat. As I turned back, I caught a snippet of conversation from a group nearby. Ethan's cousin, a man in a crisp suit with a smug grin, chuckling with his date, her red dress catching the light. "High school dropout, can you believe it? Clara's mom of all people." He didn't see me, but his words pinned me to the spot, my glass trembling in my hand, the soda threatening to spill. I wanted to march over to tell him about the years I spent proving I was enough, the parent-teacher meetings I attended in my diner uniform, the pride in Clara's eyes when she aced her exams. But my feet wouldn't move, rooted by shame and fear. Clara's laughter rang out again, bright and pure, and I clung to it, willing myself to stay, for her, to not let their words break me. Rachel appeared at my side, touching my arm, her bracelet jingling softly. "Ignore them," she said, but her voice wavered, and I saw the truth in her eyes, shadowed by her mascara. She'd heard it too, and worse, she'd known this might happen. "Clara told me they were tough to deal with during planning," she added, almost a whisper, her breath warm with wine. "She didn't want you to feel out of place." Her words were meant to comfort, but they twisted the knife a betrayal I hadn't expected. Clara had known, and she hadn't warned me, hadn't shielded me from this polished cruelty. I looked across the room where Margaret was now chatting with a cluster of guests, her laughter bright, her diamond necklace sparkling, her gaze sliding past me like I was a smudge on the glass. The ballroom felt smaller, the air heavier, thick with the scent of flowers and judgment. I gripped my glass tighter, the ice clinking softly, a fragile sound against the music's swell. I wanted to believe Clara's wave meant everything was fine, that I could still be her rock in this glittering world. But the doubt was creeping in, a quiet question I couldn't shake. Did I really belong at my daughter's side anymore? I weaved through the crowd, my soda glass now warm in my hand, the bubbles gone flat, searching for a quiet corner to catch my breath. The ballroom's glow felt mocking, every chandelier casting light on my unease, their prisms scattering rainbows I couldn't touch. I spotted Clara across the room, her hand on Ethan's arm, her smile tight, as she nodded to something Margaret said, her earrings catching the light. I wanted to go to her, to ask if she was okay, if she felt the same sting I did, but my feet felt glued to the polished floor, the cousin's words still echoing sharp and relentless. High school dropout. Unworthy. A burst of laughter from the head table jolted me loud enough to cut through the quartet's soft notes. Margaret stood, glass raised, her voice carrying over the music smooth and commanding. To Ethan's elite upbringing, a foundation Clara will now share. Her eyes met mine for a split second, sharp and deliberate, a glint of triumph in them before she turned away. The guests clapped, some chuckling, their gazes flickering toward me like I was a sideshow, their silk dresses and tailored suits a wall I couldn't breach. My chest tightened, the air too thick to breathe the room's warmth, now a suffocating blanket. I set my glass down on a passing tray, hands trembling, and slipped toward the hallway, needing escape, the clack of my heels echoing in my ears. In the dimly lit restroom, I leaned over the sink, its porcelain cool against my palms, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection stared back in the gilded mirror. Tired eyes, framed by lines earned from years of late nights and early mornings. My lipstick faded from nervous biting. I thought of Clara at 6, her tiny hands clutching a library book, as I stumbled through the words, teaching her to love stories I'd never mastered myself, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. Those nights felt like proof I'd been enough a mother who gave everything. But here, surrounded by degrees and wealth, that proof crumbled my reflection, blurring with unshed tears. The door creaked, and a woman entered, her uniform marking her as a server, her apron stained with faint traces of sauce. She hesitated, then smiled softly, her eyes warm. "You're Amanda Wright, from the diner on Maple." I nodded, surprised, wiping my face with a paper towel. She introduced herself as Lily, her voice steady despite her quick movements. "I used to come in for coffee. You always remembered my order, black with 2 sugars." Her kindness was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge, her words grounding me in a world I knew. She glanced at the door, lowering her voice. "These people, they look down on folks like us. Don't let them win." I thanked her, my voice barely a whisper, the water still dripping from my chin. She left, and I was alone again, the restroom's quiet hum, a brief refuge. I reached into my purse, fingers brushing a folded piece of paper worn at the edges. It was a note from Clara written when she was 10, her childish scrawl declaring, "You're my hero." I held it tightly, the words anchoring me a faint pulse of courage. But as I tucked it away, the restroom door swung open again, and Rachel slipped in her face. Tense, her clutch bag clutched tight. "I saw you leave," she said, her voice low, almost urgent. "Margaret's toast. It was awful." I'm sorry. I wanted to snap to ask why she hadn't said anything out there, why she'd let me drown in their scorn. But I just nodded, too drained to argue, my hands still damp. She hesitated, then added, I heard one of Ethan's friends say something worse, about how Clara's better off without an unworthy parent. The word unworthy hit like a stone, sinking deep, heavier than the nameplate's sting. Rachel reached for my hand, her fingers cool, but I pulled back the sting too, raw, my heart pounding against the silence. Back in the ballroom, the music had softened, couples swaying on the dance floor, their shadows long and graceful. Clara was with Ethan now, her head on his shoulder, but her eyes searched the room, landing on me, a flicker of worry in them. She started to move my way, her gown trailing softly, but Margaret intercepted her, whispering something that made Clara's face fall, her shoulders stiffening. I stood frozen, the note in my purse no longer enough to hold me together, its ink smudged by my fingers. The room spun, and I knew I couldn't stay much longer, not with their words carving into me, not with the fear that Clara might see me as they did, a shadow in her bright new world. The ballroom pulsed with music, but it felt distant, like a song from someone else's life, the violins faint against the chatter. I stood near the edge of the crowd, Clara's note still tucked in my purse, its weight both comfort and ache, the paper's texture rough against my fingertips. I wanted to find her, to pull her aside, and ask if she saw what I did, if she felt the same sting from Margaret's words. But she was caught in a swirl of guests, her smile strained, her gown catching the light like a fragile dream. I couldn't reach her without crossing a sea of judgmental eyes, their tailored suits and sparkling jewelry a barrier I couldn't breach. Ethan's father, Harold, appeared beside me, his cologne sharp, a mix of cedar and smoke, his suit pristine, not a wrinkle in sight. He cleared his throat, his voice low but firm, carrying the weight of authority. Amanda, you must be proud of Clara. She's overcome so much considering your limited influence. His words were a blade slicing through the fragile shield I'd built, each syllable precise, meant to wound. I opened my mouth to respond, but my voice caught, trapped by the fear of making a scene, of proving them right. He raised an eyebrow, waiting, his lips curling slightly, and I managed a tight nod, my nails digging into my palms, leaving faint crescents in my skin. I turned away, my heart pounding, the room's lights blurring at the edges, and spotted Sophie, Clara's maid of honor, waving me over for photos, her smile bright but fleeting. Relief flickered, a chance to feel included, to be part of Clara's day. But as I approached, Ethan's sister, Lauren, stepped in, her smile cold, her blonde hair pinned perfectly. "Oh, we're just doing family shots now," she said, her tone sweet, but cutting a knife wrapped in velvet. Sophie hesitated, her camera dangling, then looked away, her cheeks flushing, and I was left standing there, the camera flashing without me, its clicks a rhythm of exclusion. The rejection burned hotter than Harold's words, a fire in my chest, and I retreated to a corner, my breath shallow, the air tasting of perfume and pretense. Across the room, Clara was still with Margaret, her posture stiff, her hands clasped tightly. I caught a glimpse of her eyes, wide and uncertain, as Margaret leaned in, whispering again, her hand on Clara's arm, possessive. My stomach twisted, a knot of fear and doubt. Was Clara ashamed of me? The thought clawed at me, raw and relentless, a shadow I couldn't shake. I tried to focus on the roses draped over the tables, their petals too perfect, too fragile, their scent cloying now. But then I heard Lauren's voice, sharp and mocking, drifting from a nearby group, her laugh like glass breaking. "Did you see her car out front? A total junker?" No wonder Clara wanted a new family. My face flushed, the heat rising to my ears, my hands trembling as I gripped my purse. Rachel was suddenly at my side, her hand on my arm, her touch light but urgent. "Amanda, don't listen," she said, but her voice trembled, and I saw the guilt in her eyes. Her lips pressed thin. "Lauren's been at it all night. I heard her earlier laughing about your job at the diner." I pulled away, my anger flaring not just at Lauren, but at Rachel for staying silent, for letting these people tear me apart piece by piece. Her inaction, a betrayal I couldn't forgive. I forced myself to move, joining a small circle of Clara's co-workers near the bar, hoping for a distraction, their glasses clinking softly. They were young, polished, talking about graduate programs and research grants, their voices confident, their words a maze I couldn't navigate. I smiled, trying to follow, but their terms, methodology, peer review, were a foreign language full of sharp edges I'd never learned. One of them, a woman with sleek hair and a silver bracelet, turned to me. "So, Amanda, what's your field?" The question was innocent, but it landed like a trap, exposing my lack. I mumbled something about working in hospitality, my voice barely audible, and the conversation shifted, their voices speeding past me, leaving me silent and small, a ghost in their world. The room felt like it was closing in the laughter and clinking glasses, a chorus of exclusion, the air thick with the scent of wine and roses. I looked for Clara again, desperate for her light, but she was gone, lost in the crowd, her absence a void. My hands shook, and I gripped the edge of a table, the roses blurring before my eyes, their petals wilting at the edges. I'd spent my life building a world for Clara, but here in hers, I was nothing. And the worst part? I was starting to believe they were right. Their words sinking deep, rooting in my doubts. The ballroom's lights dimmed as a slideshow flickered to life on a screen above the dance floor, pulling my gaze from the table's edge, the projector's hum, a faint buzz. I straightened, hoping for a glimpse of Clara's childhood, our shared moments captured in time, the nights we'd spent laughing over pizza or reading under a blanket. The first images showed her with Ethan, their smiles bright. Then Ethan's family at lavish vacations, all polished and proud, their yacht gleaming under a tropical sun. My heart sank as a photo of Clara and me, one I'd sent for this very moment, flashed briefly before being skipped, replaced by Margaret and Harold beaming with Clara at her college graduation, their arms around her, like she was theirs. The guests murmured approval, their claps a quiet dagger to my chest, each sound a nail in my erasure. I stood frozen, my breath shallow as the slideshow looped on. Without me, the screen's light casting long shadows. It was as if I'd been erased, my years of love and struggle wiped clean, my existence reduced to a flicker they'd chosen to ignore. Clara was across the room, her back to me, surrounded by Ethan's relatives, their laughter a wall I couldn't breach. Did she even notice? The question gnawed, twisting into a darker fear. Was she relieved to leave me behind in this new, shinier world, her mother a relic she'd outgrown? I slipped back toward the bar, needing distance, my heels sinking into the plush carpet. Lily, the server from earlier, caught my eye, her tray balanced with empty glasses. She was clearing plates, her movements quick but deliberate, her braids swinging slightly. She paused, leaning close, her voice a whisper over the crowd's hum. "I saw what they did with the photos," she said, her eyes steady, holding mine. "My mom went through something like this, judged for being a seamstress. You don't deserve it." Her words were kind, a balm to my raw heart, but they only deepened the ache, a reminder that even a stranger saw my pain clearer than my own family. Her empathy, a mirror to my isolation. I nodded, unable to speak, and turned away, my eyes burning the bar's polished wood, cool under my fingers. The bar was crowded now, but I felt alone, the chatter around me, a dull roar, the clink of ice in glasses, a mocking rhythm. I reached for my purse, needing the anchor of Clara's note, but my fingers brushed something else. A new nameplate slipped onto my table when I wasn't looking, its edges sharp. It read, "Unfit Mother" in sharp, mocking letters, the ink bold and cruel. My stomach lurched, and I scanned the room, catching Lauren's smirk as she whispered to a friend, her eyes glinting with triumph. She'd done this. I was sure her cruelty bolder now, a public taunt. Rachel appeared again, her face pale, her earrings catching the light as she moved. "Amanda, I saw Lauren messing with your table earlier," she admitted, her voice low, almost swallowed by the music. "I should have stopped her. I just didn't want to make things worse." Her apology felt hollow, her inaction a betrayal of its own, her eyes avoiding mine, fixed on the floor. I stared at her, my anger rising, but words failed me, my throat tight with hurt. She'd stood by while they tore me apart, and now she expected me to absolve her. I shook my head, turning away, the nameplate heavy in my hand, its weight a stone in my palm. The music swelled, a slow song, pulling couples to the floor, their silhouettes swaying like shadows in a dream. Clara was still out of reach, her silhouette blurred by the crowd, her gown a faint glow. I wanted to scream, to demand why she hadn't fought for me, why she let these people rewrite our story. But the truth pressed harder. Maybe she didn't see me the way I saw her. Maybe I was the one clinging to a bond that no longer fit a mother out of place in her daughter's polished life. The nameplate slipped from my fingers, landing softly on the table, and I knew I couldn't stay here, not like this, not with my heart breaking under their gaze, the room a cage of light and scorn. The ballroom's lights seemed to pulse in time with my racing heart, the music a distant hum, the violins fading into a soft drone as I moved toward the exit. My purse felt heavy, the weight of Clara's note and that cruel nameplate pulling me down, their edges pressing through the fabric. I couldn't stay, not with their laughter echoing in my head, not with the slideshow's erasure burning behind my eyes. Each skipped photo a wound. I needed air, needed to escape the suffocating weight of being unwanted. The air thick with the scent of roses and disdain. My hand was on the door, its brass handle cool when I heard her voice, sharp and desperate, cutting through the crowd's murmur. "Mom, wait!" I turned, and there was Clara, her white dress catching the light, its lace shimmering like moonlight, her eyes wide with tears, her mascara smudged at the corners. She ran to me, heels clicking on the floor, her veil trailing behind, and grabbed my arm, her grip fierce. "Please don't go," she said, her voice breaking, a sob catching in her throat. "Let's go home, together." The words hit me like a wave, stealing my breath, their weight almost knocking me back. Home. She was leaving her own wedding, her new life for me. I stared at her, searching her face, seeing the girl who used to cling to me during thunderstorms, her small body pressed against mine, not the bride surrounded by wealth. "Clara, what are you saying?" I whispered, my voice barely steady, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it. She clutched my hand, her fingers trembling, and I noticed the bracelet I'd made her when she was 8 still on her wrist. Its beads, faded but whole, a tiny thread of our past, woven into this moment. "I heard them," she said, her voice low, raw, each word heavy with pain. "Margaret, Lauren, all of them. The things they said about you. I can't stay here, not with people who hurt you like that." Her words were a jolt, pride and pain colliding in my chest, a storm of awe and fear, her loyalty a light in the dark. Ethan appeared behind her, his face pale, his tie loosened, his polished shoes scuffed at the toes. "Clara, please," he said, his voice soft but urgent, his hands raised slightly as if to hold her back. "Let's talk about this." But his eyes darted to the crowd, to his family watching, their faces, a mix of shock and disapproval. And I saw the hesitation, the way he shrank under their gaze, his shoulders hunching. Clara shook her head, her grip on me tightening, her nails pressing into my skin. "No, Ethan, I won't pretend this is okay." Her defiance stunned me, a fire I hadn't seen in her since she was a teenager, standing up to bullies who mocked our thrift store clothes, her voice fierce despite her trembling hands. Rachel pushed through the guests, her face a mix of panic and guilt, her clutch bag slipping from her grasp, her eyes wide. "Clara, you can't just leave," she said, her voice sharp, almost shrill, cutting through the murmurs. "This is your day." Clara turned on her eyes, blazing, her cheeks flushed with anger. "You saw what they did to Mom, Rachel? You always see, and you never say anything. Don't tell me what my day should be." Her words cut sharp and precise, and Rachel flinched, stepping back, her lips parting, but no sound coming, her silence louder than any apology. I wanted to reach for her to soften the moment, to ease the fracture, but Clara's hand anchored me, her choice, anchoring us both a tether in the chaos. The room seemed to still, the guests' murmurs fading. Their glasses paused midair as they noticed the scene unfolding, their eyes heavy and judging a collective weight. I felt their stares, sharp as pins, but Clara's presence was a shield, her courage, a mirror of the strength I'd tried to give her, her defiance a flame I hadn't known she carried. Yet guilt gnawed at me. Had I caused this? Was I tearing her from her future, her new life unraveling because of me? My heart pounded, torn between awe at her loyalty and fear of what this moment would cost her, its price a shadow I couldn't shake. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, wet with tears, and I knew we weren't done. Not yet, not with the truth still hanging between us, fragile and sharp. Margaret's shadow loomed as she stormed toward us, her heels snapping against the floor, each step a crack of thunder, her face twisted with fury, her lips a tight line. The crowd parted their whispers, a low hum, a rising tide, and I felt Clara's hand tighten in mine, her breath hitching, her pulse racing through her fingers. "What is this nonsense?" Margaret hissed, her voice loud enough for the room to hear, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Amanda, you're ruining everything. A leech like you has no place here." The word leech burned, stripping me bare before the guests, their gasps a chorus of judgment, their eyes wide, some gleaming with cruel delight. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady but trembling with rage, her shoulders squared, her gown rustling softly. "Stop it, Margaret. My mom's worth more than all of you." She turned to the crowd, her eyes blazing, her tears catching the light. "I'm leaving with her." The DJ cut the music, the silence deafening, amplifying every word, each syllable a stone dropped into still water. Guests froze glasses midair as Clara's declaration echoed a public rebuke that shook the room, the chandeliers trembling faintly above. I wanted to cheer, to cry, but my heart was too heavy, guilt and pride warring within me, a storm I couldn't calm. Ethan's brother Nathan pushed through, his jaw tight, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his voice cold as he spoke. "Clara, you're making a mistake," he said, then turned to me, his eyes narrowing, his tone icy. "You've always been a burden. She deserves better." His words were a final blow, echoing every doubt I'd buried, each one a weight on my chest, crushing me. Clara snapped back. "Don't you dare!" Her voice cracking, her hands clenched, but I saw the cost of her stand, the fracture in her new life, her dream unraveling before her eyes. Margaret laughed, sharp and cruel, her voice slicing through the silence, her earrings glinting with every shake of her head. "Go then. Take your pathetic mother and leave." The guests murmured, some nodding their approval, a knife to my soul, their whispers a rising tide. I looked at Clara, her face pale, her eyes locked on mine, and saw the girl I'd raised now tearing her world apart for me, her courage a mirror to my pain. My chest ached, torn between awe and despair, the room spinning, its lights blurring. Had I pushed her to this, my hurt breaking her future? The weight of their scorn crushed me, and I stood there voiceless as the moment shattered everything I'd fought to hold together, my heart a ruin in the quiet. The morning light filtered through my apartment's faded curtains, their floral pattern worn thin, casting soft shadows across the cluttered coffee table where Clara's wedding bouquet lay, its petals curling, still fragrant but wilting. I sat on the couch, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea, the steam curling upward, the silence heavy after last night's chaos. Clara slept in her old room, her decision to leave the wedding with me, both a lifeline and a burden, her presence a quiet weight in the small space. I kept replaying Margaret's words, Nathan's sneer, the crowd's murmurs, Leach burden, each one a thorn in my skin. They stung, but Clara's stand for me burned brighter, a fire urging me to do something, anything to reclaim my worth, to prove I wasn't what they said. I set the mug down, the ceramic clinking softly against the wood, my fingers brushing a scarf Clara had knitted for me years ago. Its uneven stitches a reminder of her love. Its soft wool faded, but warm. An idea took root, bold and terrifying, its edges sharp in my mind. I'd go to Ethan's family's company, where I'd once scrubbed floors as a cleaner, my hands raw from bleach, and confront them. They'd laid me off years ago, citing my lack of a degree, their dismissal letter, cold and final, and now they mocked me at my daughter's wedding. I couldn't let that stand, not after Clara's sacrifice, her choice to walk away with me. Clara emerged, her hair messy, her eyes tired but warm, her oversized sweater swallowing her frame. "Mom, you okay?" she asked, curling up beside me, her voice soft, an echo of her childhood mornings. I hesitated, the tea's warmth seeping into my palms, then told her my plan, my words halting but firm. Her face tightened, a flicker of worry crossing her eyes, but she nodded, her fingers twisting the sweater's hem. "They own that place," she said softly, her voice low, almost a whisper. "It's where they tried to control me too, during the engagement, pushing their ideas for the wedding, for my life." Her words fueled me, tying my pain to hers, a shared wound that strengthened my resolve. I pulled the scarf around my neck, its warmth steadying my nerves, and stood, my knees stiff from sitting. "I need to do this," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, a vow to us both. A knock at the door startled us sharp in the quiet morning. It was Lily, the server from the wedding, her coat dusted with early snow, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her eyes fierce. "I heard what happened," she said, stepping inside her boots, leaving faint wet prints on the floor. "I'm driving you. I'm done with that company myself." Her solidarity surprised me, a spark in the dim room, but I welcomed it, grateful for an ally, her presence, a reminder that I wasn't alone. As we talked, she shared how Margaret had belittled her at work, calling her just a waitress in front of clients, her voice sharp with disdain. I saw my own hurt in her story, her anger a mirror to mine, and it strengthened my resolve. My hands steady now, as I sipped my tea. Rachel called as I gathered my things, her voice shaky with apologies crackling through the phone's speaker. "Amanda, I messed up last night. I should have stood up for you," she said. Her words rushed heavy with guilt. I paused, the phone heavy in my hand, her silence at the wedding still stinging a wound I couldn't touch. "I need time, Rachel," I said, keeping my tone even, my fingers tracing the scarf's edge. She sighed, a soft sound of defeat, and I hung up, focusing on the task ahead, the call's echo fading. I slipped on my boots, their soles worn thin, the scarf tied around my neck, and glanced at Clara, her eyes steady on me. She hugged me, her embrace fierce, her sweater soft against my cheek. "Be careful, Mom," she whispered, her voice a quiet anchor. Lily's car rumbled through the city, its heater rattling the corporate office looming closer, its glass facade cold and imposing, reflecting the gray sky. My stomach churned the scarf's warmth, not enough to calm my nerves. But I thought of Clara's bracelet, her choice to walk away with me, her courage, a light I carried. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, but for her, for Lily, for every time we'd been made small. As we pulled into the parking lot, the gravel crunching under the tires, I felt a spark of strength flicker inside me, fragile, but growing ready to face the people who'd tried to break us, my breath fogging the window as I steeled myself. The corporate office's lobby was a maze of glass and steel, its polished floors reflecting my hesitant steps, the air cool and sterile, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner. Lily stayed close, her presence a quiet anchor as we approached the reception desk, her boots squeaking softly. My scarf felt like armor, but my pulse raced each beat, a reminder of the years I'd spent invisible here, mopping these same floors, my reflection a ghost in the glass. I asked for Harold, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, the words clear in the quiet lobby. The receptionist, her nails clicking on the keyboard, raised an eyebrow but made a call, her tone clipped professional. "He'll see you," she said, pointing to an elevator, its doors gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The ride up was silent, the hum of the elevator amplifying my nerves, its walls a cage of polished metal. I thought of Clara's face this morning, her trust in me, her eyes bright despite the weight of her choice, and straightened my shoulders, the scarf brushing my chin. The doors opened to a sleek hallway, lined with framed awards, and Harold's office loomed at the end. Its door half open, a sliver of light spilling out. He sat behind a wide desk, his suit immaculate, his expression a mix of surprise and disdain, his pen poised over a document. "Amanda," he said, leaning back his chair, creaking softly. "This is unexpected. What do you want?" I took a breath, the air sharp in my lungs, setting my purse on a chair, its strap worn from years of use. I pulled out a thin folder I'd prepared at home, its edges creased, holding photos of Clara's milestones, her first science fair ribbon, blue and crisp, her graduation cap moments I'd made possible through diner shifts and sleepless nights, my hands raw from work. "I want you to know who I am," I said, my voice low but firm, each word a step forward. "You called me a leech, but I built Clara's life. This is what my limited influence did." I slid the folder across his desk, my hands steady now, the wood cool under my fingers. Harold's eyes narrowed, but he opened it, flipping through the pages, his fingers pausing on a photo of Clara's science fair, her smile wide. I kept talking, my words spilling out, each one a brick in a wall I was building, my voice growing stronger. "You fired me from this place because I didn't have a degree. You laughed at me at my daughter's wedding. But I'm not nothing." My voice caught a brief hitch, but I pushed on, thinking of Lily's story of Clara's bracelet, their strength woven into mine. "Clara's my proof, and I'm hers." A young woman, Mia, appeared at the door, her badge marking her as an employee, her hair tied back, her eyes wide with curiosity. She hesitated, then spoke, her voice quiet but bold. "I heard you, Amanda. I've seen how they treat people here." "You're not alone." Her words were a spark, and Harold's jaw tightened, his pen tapping the desk. I glanced at her, gratitude flickering, and pulled a faded photo from my purse one a coworker had snapped years ago, me in a cleaner's uniform scrubbing this very office. My face tired but determined. I set it on his desk, its edges curled. "This was me," I said, my voice steady now. "You didn't see me then. You will now." Harold's face flushed, his fingers pausing on the photo. His silence heavy, but he said nothing, his eyes avoiding mine. Mia stepped closer, her presence a quiet defiance, her eyes on me bright with respect. I felt a shift, a spark of power I hadn't known I carried. The room's air charged, the hum of the heater faint in the background. I stood taller, my scarf brushing my chin, its wool a reminder of Clara's love. I'd spoken my truth not for his approval, but for me, for Clara, for every moment I'd been made to feel small. As I met his gaze unflinching, I knew this was only the beginning, and I let the silence speak louder than words, its weight of victory of its own. Back in my apartment, the late afternoon sun slanted through the window, catching dust motes above the worn rug, their dance a quiet rhythm in the still air. Clara sat across from me at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of a water glass. Its surface smudged her wedding ring, glinting faintly under the dim bulb. She'd stayed here since the wedding, her suitcase still unpacked in the corner, its zipper glinting a quiet testament to her choice. My confrontation with Harold at the company yesterday felt like a dream, my words to him echoing in my mind, both heavy and freeing, a weight lifted, yet lingering. Clara broke the silence, her voice soft, barely above the hum of the fridge. "Mom, Ethan's coming over soon. He wants to talk." Her eyes were guarded, shadowed by sleepless nights, and I nodded, unsure what to expect, my tea now cold in its mug. The weight of her postponed honeymoon pressed on me, a ripple from her decision to leave with me. Her life paused because of my stand. Had I pulled her into my fight too far? Her future dimmed by my need to be seen. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the steam rising from my tea, its warmth grounding me, the mug's chip, a familiar flaw. The doorbell rang sharp and jarring, and Ethan stepped inside, his coat damp from the drizzle outside, the fabric dark at the shoulders. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. Nothing like the polished groom from days ago. His charm faded. "Amanda Clara," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I'm sorry for what my family did. I should have stopped them." His apology was earnest, but his eyes flicked to Clara, pleading more for her than for me. A quiet desperation in his gaze. Clara's face stayed still, her fingers pausing on the glass, her knuckles pale. "Words aren't enough, Ethan," she said, her tone even but firm, her voice cutting through the room's quiet. "Your family humiliated my mom. You stood there silent." Her words were a quiet blade, precise and unyielding, and Ethan flinched, running a hand through his hair, his fingers trembling slightly. I wanted to speak, to ease the tension, to soften the edge, but my throat tightened, the memory of Nathan's sneer at the wedding still raw, his voice a ghost in my mind. Ethan sat, his hands clasped, his knuckles white. "I know I failed you," he said, his voice breaking. "But Clara, I need you to come back. We can fix this." Before Clara could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily, its screen lighting up the table. I glanced at it, my breath catching the words sharp against the dim room. A local news site had published a story about my stand at the company titled, "Single Mom Challenges Corporate Elitism," its headline bold. Mia, the employee who'd spoken up, had shared my story with a reporter, her words amplifying mine. My hands shook as I read the public spotlight, both thrilling and terrifying, a mirror to my courage and my fear. I showed Clara, and her eyes widened, a mix of pride and worry crossing her face, her lips parting slightly. Ethan saw the screen and frowned, his brow furrowing, his voice tight. "This could hurt the company," he said, his words clipped, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Clara's gaze hardened, her posture stiffening. "Good," she said, standing her chair, scraping the floor. "They deserve it." The air grew thick, Ethan's silence louder than any protest, his hands still clasped frozen. I felt the shift, my actions rippling beyond that office, touching lives I hadn't known, but guilt gnawed at me sharp and relentless. Clara's marriage was fraying, and I couldn't shake the fear that I'd set this in motion, my voice a spark that burned too bright. The room stilled, Ethan's eyes on Clara, hers on me, and I sat there, caught in the quiet storm of what I'd done. My tea cold, the world shifting under my feet. The kitchen clock ticked softly, its rhythm a stark contrast to the tension hanging between us, its hands steady in the dim light. Ethan's hands stayed clasped, his gaze fixed on the table, avoiding Clara's steady eyes, his jaw tight. I set my phone down, the news article's words still swirling in my mind, a public echo of my private stand, its reach both exhilarating and heavy. Clara's single word. Good lingered sharp and unyielding, a blade in the quiet. And I felt the weight of her choice to stay with me, her life now tangled in the fallout of my actions. Her suitcase, a silent witness. Lily texted again, her message. Brief, but electric, its words lighting up my screen. Employees are talking, some want change. I read it silently, my heart quickening, the possibility of impact stirring within me. My words to Harold had sparked something, a ripple through the company's polished walls, a crack in their facade. But before I could process it, Harold's name flashed on my phone, a call I hadn't expected, its ring sharp in the quiet. I hesitated, my fingers hovering, then answered, my voice, low, almost a whisper. Amanda, he said, his tone clipped cold as glass, will issue a public apology. For the wedding. To protect our image. His words were calculated, not remorseful, a business move, and I felt a chill realizing he saw me as a problem to manage, a liability to contain. I ended the call without responding, my fingers tight around the phone, its weight heavy in my hand, the screen fading to black. Clara watched me, her expression unreadable, her glass still untouched, but Ethan shifted his voice, cautious, almost hopeful. That's a start, right? They're backing down. Clara's jaw tightened, and she leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. It's not enough, Ethan. An apology for show. They need to mean it. Her voice was quiet, but it cut a steel edge beneath her calm, and Ethan looked away. His silence, a confession of his family's control over him, his shoulders slumping further. A knock broke the moment, soft but insistent, and Lily stepped in, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her scarf loose around her neck. Amanda. I just came from the diner, she said, her eyes bright, her voice quick with excitement. People are talking about your story, sharing it over coffee. Workers at the company are sharing their own about unfair pay, disrespect. It's growing. Her words lit a spark in me, a flicker of hope, but it flickered against the guilt weighing my chest, heavy as stone. Clara's marriage was cracking, and now I'd stirred a storm I hadn't planned, its reach beyond my control. I nodded, managing a faint smile, but my throat tightened, the room too small for the emotions crowding it, the air thick with unspoken fears. Later, alone in the living room, I sat with a stack of old letters Clara had written me as a kid. Their envelopes yellowed, her loopy handwriting, a reminder of simpler days, her words full of love. The doorbell rang, unexpected in the evening's quiet, and a woman stood there. Diane, a former co-worker from my cleaning days, her coat buttoned tight against the chill. Her eyes were wet, her voice soft, trembling slightly. I saw the article, she said, her hands clasped. You helped me back then, gave me courage to keep going when I wanted to quit. Now you're doing it again for so many. She hugged me, brief but fierce, her coat cold against my skin, and left her gratitude a quiet earthquake in my heart, Shaking loose, something I hadn't named, I closed the door. Diane's words sinking in warm but heavy. But they couldn't erase the ache, the fear that I'd cost Clara too much. Clara's suitcase still sat in the corner, its zipper catching the lamplight, Ethan's defeated posture replaying in my mind, his eyes avoiding hers. My stand had shifted, something given voice to others, a chorus I hadn't expected, but it had cost Clara her peace. Maybe her future, her life paused in my small apartment. I sank onto the couch. The letters untouched my hands. Empty, the room's quiet, pressing in. The world was listening now, but the price felt too steep, and I sat in the silence, the weight of my choices settling like dust heavy, and still, my heart a quiet ruin. The park was quiet, its paths lined with bare trees, their branches stark against the pale November sky, their shadows long on the frost-dusted grass. Clara and I walked side by side, our boots crunching on fallen leaves, their brittle edges scattering the crisp air, carrying a hint of winter sharp in my lungs. My coat was thin, its collar frayed, but I felt warm, the weight of the past week settling into something softer, less jagged, a bruise beginning to fade. Clara's presence was steady, her silence comfortable, a far cry from the storm of the wedding and its aftermath. Her steps matching mine in a quiet rhythm. I'd come here to think, to breathe, and she'd joined me without question, her scarf trailing loosely, her breath visible in the cold. We stopped by a small fountain, its water bubbling gently, a sound that eased the tightness in my chest, its ripples catching the weak sunlight. Clara sat on its stone edge, her scarf loose around her neck, her gloves tucked into her pocket, and looked at me, her eyes clear but deep. Holding a weight, I recognized. "Mom," she said, her voice low, almost lost in the fountain's murmur. "I've been scared of losing myself in Ethan's world, their rules, their expectations. It's why I left with you." Her honesty caught me off guard, her vulnerability a mirror to the girl who once confessed her fears before her first school dance, her voice small but brave, her hands clutching mine. I sat beside her, my hands in my lap, the stone cool through my coat, the fountain's hum grounding me, its rhythm steady. "I've been scared too." I admitted, my words slow, each one heavy with truth. "Scared I pushed you into this mess, that I cost you your happiness, your new life." Clara shook her head, her eyes fierce, her breath a soft cloud in the air. "You didn't. You showed me what strength looks like, what it means to stand up." Her words landed softly like leaves, gentle but firm, and I felt a shift, a quiet pride in the woman she'd become, so like me, yet stronger. Her courage, a light I'd helped kindle. A jogger passed her dog trotting beside her, its tags jingling, and I thought of the years I'd spent running not on paths, but through life, always chasing enough for Clara, my days, a blur of diner shifts and school forms. This park was where I'd brought her as a kid, pushing her on swings until my arms ached, her laughter, my reward, her pigtails bouncing. Now sitting here, I saw those moments differently, not as proof of my struggle, but as proof of my love, each push a promise kept. The realization was small, but it steadied me, like finding solid ground after a storm. The fountain's water, a quiet echo of my heart. Lily's text buzzed in my pocket, its vibration sharp against the quiet, and I glanced at it, the screen's light faint. The company had announced new policies, fairer pay, better treatment sparked by the article, and employee voices, a change born from our collective stand. I showed Clara, and she smiled, a real one, not the strained kind from the wedding, her lips curving softly. You did that, Mom, she said, her voice warm, and I shrugged, unsure how to carry the weight of that truth, my fingers brushing the phone's edge. It wasn't just me. It was Mia, Lily Diane, all of us who'd spoken up, our voices a chorus, not a solo. But for the first time, I didn't feel small. My presence, no longer a shadow. Clara leaned against me, her shoulder warm through her coat, and we watched the fountain, its ripples catching the light, each one a fleeting mirror. I thought of a letter Rachel had sent left unopened on my table, its envelope crisp, her words waiting like a bridge. I wasn't ready to cross their weight, a quiet pressure. Not yet. For now, this moment with Clara was enough a pause before the world moved again, the park's stillness a gift. My breath slowed the air clean and sharp, and I let myself rest in the quiet feeling the edges of my heart begin to mend the fountain's murmur, a lullaby for my soul. The fountain's steady trickle filled the silence as Clara and I sat the park's stillness, wrapping around us like a soft blanket, the air crisp and clean. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, and I felt the weight of the past week's shift, not gone, but quieter, like a river settling after a storm, its current slow but steady. Clara's shoulder brushed mine, her warmth a reminder of why I'd fought, why I'd spoken up, her presence a light in my world. I glanced at her, her profile calm, her eyes tracing the fountain's ripples, and saw my own resilience reflected, tempered now by a new kind of peace, a quiet strength we shared. Footsteps crunched nearby soft on the leaf-strewn path, and Ethan approached, his hands in his pockets, his expression tentative, his coat open despite the chill. "Clara, Amanda," he said, stopping a few feet away, his voice steady but soft. "I've been thinking. I'm done letting my family dictate us. I'll stand with you, Clara, whatever it takes." His words were firm, not pleading like before, and Clara's eyes softened, her scarf slipping slightly, though she didn't speak, her gaze searching his face. I watched them, a flicker of hope stirring a small warmth in my chest. But I stayed quiet, letting her moment unfold, my hands still in my lap. Clara nodded slowly, her fingers twisting her scarf, her gloves still tucked away, her movements deliberate. "We'll see, Ethan," she said, her tone measured, but open, a door cracked, but not flung wide. "But it's my terms now?" He exhaled a small smile, breaking through faint but real, and I felt a knot loosen in my chest, a tension easing. Not everything was fixed, but it was a start. A crack in the wall, we'd all built a step towards something new. Ethan sat on the fountain's edge, joining our silence, his boots scuffing the stone, and for a moment, the three of us were just there, breathing in the cold air. No demands, no judgments. The fountain's murmur, a shared rhythm. My phone buzzed again, a message from Mia lighting up the screen. "You're invited to speak at a community event. Your story matters." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the offer heavy with possibility, its weight both daunting and bright. Speaking out, sharing my truth, it was a path I hadn't imagined yet. It felt right, like a door I'd always been meant to open its frame, waiting in the shadows of my life. I thought of the diner, the long shifts, the customers who'd become my family, their faces familiar, their stories woven into mine. They'd seen me even when I felt invisible, their kindness a quiet strength. Now maybe I could help others be seen too, my voice a bridge for their stories. I reached into my coat, pulling out a small keychain Clara had made in grade school. A lumpy clay heart, painted red, its edges chipped but whole. I pressed it into her hand, closing her fingers around it, its texture rough against her palm. "Keep this," I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. "You've always carried my heart. Now carry your own." Her eyes glistened, and she hugged me. The keychain pressed between us, its weight a quiet vow. It wasn't the locket from her childhood or the scarf from her teens. It was new, a quiet passing of strength from me to her, a legacy of resilience. We stood the fountain's murmur fading as we walked back toward the car, Ethan trailing a step behind, his footsteps soft on the path. The park felt different now, its bare trees not empty, but waiting ready for spring, their branches a promise of growth. I glanced at Clara, her stride sure, her scarf trailing, and felt my own steps lighten my boots less heavy. Rachel's letter still sat unopened at home, its words a quiet call. But I'd read it soon when the time was right, when my heart was ready. For now, I was here whole in this moment, my heart steady, the world soft and open before me, the sky a pale canvas of possibility. Months later, my living room glowed with the soft light of a single lamp, its warmth spilling over the walls now lined with new photos, their frames simple but cherished. One showed Clara and me at a local fair, our faces lit by cotton candy and laughter, our hair tangled by the breeze, a moment unburdened by the past. I sat on the couch, a notebook open in my lap, my pen tracing slow, deliberate words, its ink smudging slightly under my fingers. Writing had become my quiet ritual, a way to untangle the threads of who I'd been and who I was becoming, each sentence a step toward clarity, a map of my heart. Clara had moved back to her apartment with Ethan, their marriage fragile, but growing built on honest talks and boundaries she'd set her voice steady in their quiet moments. I'd watched her pack my heart full, her boxes stacked by the door, knowing she carried her strength, not just mine. Her resolve, a light I'd helped kindle. The company had changed too. Its new policies, a small victory sparked by voices like mine. Mia's, Lily's, a shift born from our collective courage. I'd spoken at that community event, my voice shaky but clear, sharing my story to a room of strangers who nodded their eyes kind. Their stories echoing my own, their applause, a quiet embrace. Lily and Mia had become friends, their visits filling my apartment with chatter and coffee mugs, their laughter a new rhythm in my home. Last week, Lily brought over a plant, a sturdy little fern, saying it suited me, its pot simple but bright. It sat on my windowsill now, its green leaves catching the morning sun, their edges soft against the glass. I watered it daily, a small act of care that felt like tending to myself too, each drop a quiet promise. Diane stopped by sometimes, her quiet presence a reminder of the bonds I'd forged, not just with Clara, but with others who'd seen me through her smile, a steady light. Rachel and I were talking again, our conversations cautious but real, our words careful but growing. Her letter, when I finally read it, held apologies and promises to do better. Its pages creased from her hands. We met for coffee, our words halting at first, the steam rising from our cups, but we laughed by the end, a tentative step toward healing her eyes, meeting mine, open and earnest. I didn't need her to be perfect, just present, and she was trying her effort a bridge we were building together. That was enough for now, a slow mending. I closed my notebook, my fingers brushing the cover, worn from weeks of use. Its pages filled with my thoughts, my truths. The apartment was still the hum of the fridge, the only sound, a quiet companion. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below, where kids played in the fading light, their shouts faint through the glass. My life wasn't grand, but it was mine, pieced together from years of grit and love. Each moment, a thread in a tapestry I'd woven. I'd spent so long feeling less, But now standing here, I felt whole, my roots deep, my heart open, the fern's leaves a quiet mirror to my growth. The fern swayed slightly, and I smiled, ready to let the past rest my reflection, faint in the glass, steady and sure. I leaned against the window frame, the glass cool against my palm, the street below now quiet as dusk settled the sky, a soft gray. The fern on the sill stood steady, its leaves a soft contrast to the city's hard edges, its green a quiet defiance. I thought of the wedding, the nameplate, the sting of being called less, each moment a scar I'd carried. Those moments had carved me, but they didn't define me anymore. I'd framed that nameplate not as a wound, but as a marker, a reminder of the strength I'd found in speaking my truth, its edges softened by time, its words no longer sharp. Clara called earlier, her voice bright, sharing how she and Ethan were navigating their new rhythm, honest and unpolished, their talks late into the night, their laughter, a new foundation. She'd started volunteering at a community center, teaching kids to read a choice that echoed my own late-night lessons with her, my voice hoarse over picture books. I smiled, hearing her purpose, knowing I'd given her roots to grow from not chains to hold her back, her strength, a legacy of my love. Mia had texted too, inviting me to another event. Her words warm, and I'd said yes, ready to share more, to listen more. My voice no longer a whisper, but a steady call. Standing there, I realized my worth wasn't in degrees or titles, nor in the eyes of those who judged me their scorn a shadow I'd left behind. It was in the love I'd poured into Clara, the courage I'd found to stand tall, the quiet bonds with Lily, Mia, Diane, even Rachel, each one a thread in my life's weave. I'd spent years measuring myself against others' scales, but now I saw my life as enough flawed, real mine, its imperfections a map of my journey. The lesson wasn't loud. It was a whisper, steady and clear. Our value lies in how we love, how we rise, how we keep going, no matter who tries to dim our light, our hearts, a light that endures. I turned from the window, the lamp's glow soft on the photos. Clara's laugh frozen in one frame, a moment of joy I'd helped create, her eyes bright with life. Life hadn't handed me a grand ending, but it had given me this, a heart that could heal, a voice that could carry a life I'd built from love and grit. I sat back down the notebook, waiting its pages open, and picked up my pen, ready to write the next page. My hand steady, my heart full. What's a moment that showed you your own worth? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, please subscribe, or share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for being here, for walking this path with me. Here's to finding our light together, to carrying it forward.